Hello, General Hospital today will reveal. After months of slow but steady growth, General Hospital seems to be walking headfirst into one of its most frustrating creative missteps, sabotaging the delicate, endearing relationship between Molly Lansing and Davis and Cody Bell just when it had the chance to flourish into something genuinely refreshing. Fans who have been invested in watching the careful unraveling of this unlikely romance are now left asking, why deny two young people shot at uncomplicated happiness? The chemistry between Molly and Cody is unmistakable, precisely because it defies easy categorization. She, a sharp, principled legal mind, and he, a rough around the edges former con artist with a heart striving to be better, have slowly built a bond that has touched viewers with its authenticity. Their romance wasn't relied on grand gestures or contrived melodrama, but on a grounded connection, honest conversations, and moments of vulnerability. That is what makes the current tension surrounding their relationship so baffling and disheartening. The latest development, sparked by a personal betrayal involving Molly's sister, Christina, undermines everything the show worked so hard to construct. Christina, in an impulsive, arguably meddling move, submitted Molly's fictional manuscripts in a publisher without her consent. The manuscript, meant to be a private outlet of Molly's inner world, was never intended to be shared publicly, let alone turned into a published work. This action alone could have been enough to ignite familial drama, but the consequences became more combustible when Cody stumbled upon the draft and realized that the lead character, Casey, was clearly based on him. While soap operas thrive on drama, this plot twist feels forced, almost as though conflict was inserted for the sake of shaking things up, rather than because it stemmed organically from character motivation. That, more than anything, is what makes this turn so frustrating. Viewers have come to appreciate the quieter, more nuanced storytelling behind Molly and Cody's evolving intimacy, a storytelling choice that stood out precisely because it resisted the usual soap tropes. Now, that quiet intimacy is being upended for a plot device that lacks emotional logic. The idea that someone he loves may have captured his flaws, his deepest fears, insecurities, and past mistakes in fictional form, and that these words might be read by strangers, strikes a nerve that goes far deeper than a simple breach of privacy. It touches on identity, dignity, and trust. For a man who has spent most of his adult life trying to rewrite his story and be seen as more than the sum of his past, discovering that the woman he trusts has, even creatively, used him as a template for a character riddled with shortcomings feels like a betrayal. That Molly didn't intend for him to read it doesn't erase the emotional weight of the discovery. And for Molly, who had no control over her sister's decision to submit the manuscript, the situation becomes even more tangled. She now must manage the fallout of a choice she didn't make and attempt to repair the damage to a relationship she deeply values. What makes the situation particularly tragic is that it didn't have to happen this way. Molly and Cody's romance had all the makings of a long-term slow burn, a relationship rooted in healing, self-awareness, and mutual growth. Instead, the show has opted to inject unnecessary turbulence, undercutting what made the pairing work in the first place. For fans, it's a disappointing pivot, one that suggests the writers don't trust their audience's appetite for character-driven romance over sensational drama. The Molly-Cody storyline had a rare opportunity to explore how two people from vastly different backgrounds could learn to build something beautiful and real, not through spectacle, but through quiet persistence. By disrupting that arc with a twist that feels more calculated than earned, the show risks alienating those who were drawn in by the gentle, believable charm of this couple. Of course, tension is inevitable in soap storytelling, but there is a difference between tension that arises naturally from who the characters are and what they want, and tension that is manufactured to fill airtime. The former deepens emotional investment, the latter strains credibility. Right now, the Molly-Cody storyline veers dangerously toward the latter. And in doing so, General Hospital squanders a moment of emotional grace in favor of surface-level complications. The tragedy here isn't that Molly and Cody are facing a challenge, it's that the challenge feels so hollow and preventable, given the strength of their foundation and the genuine goodwill audiences have extended to them. There's still time to course correct. If the show allows these two characters to communicate, to truly unpack the layers of hurt and misunderstanding with the maturity that made them so appealing, then this bump in the road could become a meaningful turning point. It could deepen their connection rather than diminish it. But if the writers insist on driving a wedge between them with increasingly dramatic and out-of-character decisions, then it risks losing something far more valuable than a fleeting shock. It risks losing the trust of the very viewers, who have stayed loyal through countless highs and lows. For now, many fans are left hoping that the heart of this couple's story hasn't been permanently lost beneath the noise of manufactured drama. They deserve better. We deserve better. And hopefully someone in the writer's room remembers that before it's too late. The heart of the problem lies in the way Cody perceives himself through the eyes of someone he loves. In Molly's manuscript, the character Casey, a stable hand with rustic charm, is portrayed as something of a caricature, foolish, unrefined, and dismissive of intellectual pursuits, even going so far as to view books merely as decorative objects. That depiction, however, fictionalized, struck a deep and painful chord in Cody. Despite the obvious fictional setting and characters, Cody could not ignore the parallels, especially when the lead male bore more than a passing resemblance to his own personality, background, and life experiences. To him, Casey wasn't just a random character. He was a distorted mirror reflecting his deepest insecurities. And the fact that Molly had written him this way before their romantic bond had fully blossomed left Cody feeling mocked, belittled, and worst of all, misunderstood. Cody's wounded pride wasn't just about how Casey was written, it was about what that portrayal implied Molly truly thought of him or once thought of him. The idea that the woman he's falling for might have seen him as simple-minded or a joke gnawed at his confidence. In his mind, Casey wasn't a romanticized version of himself. He was the punchline to a cruel joke. The warmth and trust he had been carefully building with Molly began to unravel, replaced by an internal storm of betrayal and shame. That's why Cody's reaction wasn't just sadness, it was humiliation. A raw feeling of being exposed and judged through the lens of fiction. The novel, intended to be creative catharsis, had unintentionally cut through to a truth Cody feared might be hiding behind Molly's smiles and soft words, that he was never truly seen as her equal. Molly, for her part, was caught off guard by the depth of Cody's reaction. She tried to defend her intentions, explaining that Casey was a character arc, someone who began flawed but underwent a profound transformation through the love of the story's heroine, Maddie. And Maddie, without question, was drawn from Molly's own essence, ambitious, logical, perhaps a little emotionally guarded, but ultimately open to love. According to Molly, Casey's early portrayal was not a condemnation, but a setup for growth. The narrative she crafted was meant to illustrate how love can change perceptions, how even the most seemingly mismatched individuals can discover hidden depths in each other. She reminded Cody that the novel was written during a time when they barely knew one another, when her judgments of him were based on assumptions, not on the man she later came to admire. Yet the logic of her explanation was not enough to dull the sting. Contextualizing the character after the fact only magnified the damage. Cody couldn't help but ask himself, if this is how she saw me then, how do I know some part of her doesn't still feel that way? Even if the words were drafted before their emotional closeness, the fact that Molly had those thoughts at all lingered in his mind. The timing of the manuscript, coupled with Christina's betrayal in submitting it to a publisher without Molly's approval, created a cascade of emotional confusion. Cody wasn't just processing fiction, he was processing the unfiltered reflections of a woman he trusted, packaged into a character who seemed to undermine his entire sense of self-worth. Their relationship, already moving at a glacial pace due to a combination of caution, hesitation, and emotional vulnerability, now faced yet another roadblock. What had begun as an enchanting tale of opposites attracting, built slowly, almost tentatively, over months now, threatened to collapse under the weight of a manuscript. And while the conflict may seem trivial on the surface, at its core it reveals how fragile new love can be when burdened with past perceptions and emotional baggage. Cody, for all his charm and effort, we had never quite shed his fear that others see him as nothing more than a rustic oddity, lovable perhaps, but not serious or smart enough to be truly respected. Molly's portrayal of Casey, however, unintentionally reinforced that very fear. For Molly, the heartbreak came from watching the man she cared about retreat from her, interpreting her creative expression as a condemnation rather than a journey. She had hoped he would see the growth in Casey as symbolic of the very real growth she had witnessed in Cody. She had believed that love, hers and Maddie's alike, had the power to reshape outdated views, to uncover the gold buried beneath the rough exterior. But she was forced to confront the fact that even well-meaning narratives can hurt the people they reflect. And when those people already carry emotional wounds, fiction can feel like truth dressed in metaphorical cruelty. The pacing of their romance had always been slow. Their connection, while genuine, was marked by long silences, nervous hesitations, and subtle sidesteps. Neither of them was quick to trust, and both bore scars that made vulnerability difficult. Now this incident threatened to turn their cautious path into a detour they might never recover from. Instead of moving forward into light-hearted affection and shared intimacy, they were being dragged backward into miscommunication and shame. Their hesitancy, once endearing, now seemed like a weakness, a chasm widened by creative misunderstanding. This isn't just a story about a book. It's a story about perception, intention, and the complexity of how we see and are seen by the ones we love. Cody's response wasn't overblown, it was human. And Molly's defense wasn't insincere, it was also human. But sometimes, even the most rational explanations cannot bridge the gap between how something was meant and how it was received. And when love is new, untested by hardship, that gap can feel like a canyon. As they stand at this crossroads, viewers are left wondering whether this couple, once so promising in its quiet defiance of soapy cliches, will survive. The collision between fiction and reality. Will Cody come to understand Molly's deeper admiration for him? Hidden beneath layers of narrative metaphor, can Molly earn back his trust? Not by defending her words, but by proving with actions that she sees him for who he truly is, or has the emotional blow struck too deeply, setting their relationship on a course of slow decay. For fans who have waited patiently for their romance to bloom, the hope remains that this conflict will ultimately lead to growth, not ruin. But for now, the silence between them speaks louder than any love story. In the ever-evolving landscape of General Hospital, the recent developments in Molly and Cody's storyline have struck a discordant note with many longtime viewers. It's increasingly clear that the writers are manufacturing unnecessary conflict between the two, derailing what had the potential to be a refreshingly organic, heartfelt relationship. Rather than allowing their connection to unfold naturally, full of quiet moments and slow-burning romance, the show has opted for awkward misunderstandings and forced tension. For a pairing that once promised lightheartedness, sincerity, and emotional growth, this pivot toward melodrama feels not only premature but creatively wasteful. What makes this shift so disappointing is the fact that GH desperately needs a couple like Cody and Molly right now. Their unique chemistry, playful, unpredictable, yet emotionally grounded, offered a counterbalance to the heavier storylines dominating Port Charles. Their scenes together radiated a joy that felt both modern and nostalgic, calling back to the kind of classic soap romances that rely on character development rather than external plot devices. But now, that refreshing energy has been eclipsed by uncomfortable silences and dramatic overreactions that feel more like a the checklist of soap cliches than genuine storytelling. Instead of leaning into the authentic tension